Today's show is sponsored by Adventures Unlimited Press. Take your mind on a literary journey and go to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from our famed experts right here on Truth Be Told. That's adventuresunlimitedpress.com.
What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome back to another hour of Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and with me now is world-renowned psychic, Eddie Connor.
Thanks, Tony. We're all excited here to introduce you to our guest co-host today. Please welcome psychic Jamie Gibson.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, guys.
So, Eddie, why don't you lead us off?
I would love to. Hey, you guys, what if I told you that before you were born, you yourself planned the specific experiences, relationships, and challenges that you would have had or that you now have in your life? In this hour, author Robert Schwartz joins us. He's an acclaimed hypnotherapist offering past life soul regressions as well as between lives soul regressions.
Robert's life purpose began in a professional session with a medium. He was astonished to speak with non-physical beings who knew everything about him, not just what he had done in his life, but also what he had thought and felt. They told Robert he had planned many of his most difficult experiences before he was even born.
And that's when Robert realized that having knowledge of pre-birth planning would bring healing to people, helping them understand the deeper purpose of life's challenges. He devoted years to studying pre-birth plans with dozens of individuals. Now, we believe the extraordinary insights that emerged in Robert's research speak to our own heartfelt yearning to know why.
Why do we choose the people who are in our life?
Why did we plan our most difficult challenges?
And how can we heal and experience more love, joy, and peace?
One way is to get more peace of mind is to read Robert's book, Your Soul's Plan, and also the book, Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome author and hypnotist Robert Schwartz. Yay! How are you doing, Robert?
I'm great, and I love that applause. That's wonderful.
Yay! We have one of those at home, and every time Tony goes home alone, he makes sure he plays that before he goes to bed.
Of course I do.
I think you should send me the audio. I want to play it here, too.
Yay! We'll send you the audio and the video. How about that?
There we go.
Oh, that sounds good.
So it turns out, well, I got the opportunity to read Your Soul's Plan, and then Jamie read
Your Soul's Gift.
And I'm all the way down to the last chapter, and we're both blown away by the information in the book. And you're like the juicy topic around UBN radio lately. And so then we're all like calling each other back and forth. It's like, my pre-birth plan was blah, blah, blah. And evidently, before you went live, my pre-birth plan was to choke on the Tootsie Roll.
And we were to sit by and just watch.
And they were just watching me.
Well,
and
we
I was
giggled.
like,
We didn't just sit watch. We giggled at you.
they did, and they pointed
That
a
would
lot.
be your exit point.
Yeah. So, Robert, as you can tell, we all have a sense of humor.
I see that.
So you started out in corporate America. You were super successful. You had your 401k. You had your predetermined salary. You were really climbing through the ranks. And then you had this experience with the psychics and the mediums about your pre-birth plan and your spirit guides and your angels. And then from that, you really did like a huge turn and moved into your soul's plan work. And you really jumped out of a secure payday. You jumped out of something that was a guaranteed for you. And what was it internally, emotionally, that really made you take the leap from corporate America into your soul's plan work? What was it inside that really, really got you going the most?
Well, there were a couple of things happening there. The initial impetus was really just dissatisfaction with my career. I was doing essentially different forms of corporate writing, marketing, communications, and although it was going well, I didn't feel that it was a unique expression of who I am. And I also had this lingering, almost haunting sense that I had come here in this lifetime to do something very different, but I didn't know what it was. And for a long period of time, I wasn't even sure how to figure out what it was. And so, I've come from a very conventional background, and my first attempts to figure out my soul's plan, so to speak, were very conventional in nature. I started by taking the Myers-Briggs inventory, which you may have heard of, and found out that I'm an INFJ personality type. And then, frankly, that did me no good at all. and then I went to friends and family, and I said, I'm really very unfulfilled doing this corporate work. What do you think I should do with my life? That, by the way, is not a good question to ever ask anyone.
I was going to ask.
About half the people just literally shrugged their shoulders and said, I don't know. The other half advised me to do whatever they were doing for a living, which, as you can imagine, was not very helpful. Mm-hmm. And so when these conventional attempts to figure out my higher purpose really didn't shed any light on the matter, I thought to myself, okay, I've got to think outside the box here. What can I do to figure out my unique purpose in life? And this idea came to me, go see a psychic medium. Knowing what I know now, I have to think there was a spirit guide whispering this idea in my ear. Yes. But at the time, I had never even heard the term spirit guide. I thought it was my own brilliant idea. And I thought, why not? I'll go spend an hour with the medium, invest a little bit of money, and if nothing comes from it, there's no harm done. So on May 7th of 2003, I had my first session ever with a psychic medium. And I remember the date because it was really on that day that my life changed. You spoke briefly about the session in the intro. Basically, what happened in this session is that the medium first explained to me what a spirit guide is, and she said, a guide is a highly evolved non-physical being with whom we plan our lives before we come into body, and who then guides us through our lives after we get here. And then she started to channel my guides. And they said to me, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I said, well, why in the world did I do that? And they said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Now, coming as I did from such a conventional background, I probably would have dismissed all of this as some kind of delusion on my part, except that the guides knew literally everything about me without me telling them anything. They knew what my biggest challenges had been. They were able to tell me in detail why I had wanted before birth to have these difficult experiences. And so I was just blown open by this information. And in the days and weeks after that session, I thought about this constantly. And it was very, very healing for me because it allowed me to review the course of my life and for the first time in many instances see a deeper meaning or a deeper purpose to the challenging things that had happened. So I realized I was onto a concept that could bring a similar kind of healing to other people. And that was really the beginning of what eventually became Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift. And for your listeners who are interested, the website is yoursoulsplan.com. On the books page, they can read large excerpts of both books for free.
Great.
Well,
Great.
that's so.
They're such great books.
They are. Jamie and I, like I said, especially every night when we should actually be going to bed and talking to our spirit guides in our sleep, we're talking back and forth about what she's getting out of Your Soul's Gift, and I'm telling her about the aspects I'm getting from Your Soul's Plan. And two things strike me about you, especially Robert. Number one, this is very brave of you to do. Mm-hmm. Because of the nature of what it is. And as you well know, coming from the background you came from, and then to launch into this, it obviously helped you so much. You really feel in your heart of hearts that it's going to help a lot of other people. So number one, you're extraordinarily brave. And number two, with that, sort of like the twin flame soul to your bravery is you have answered the age-old question, why bad things happen to good people, and more generally, why things happen to us at all.
Yes.
And so I would love to know, did you feel like you were launching a really brave journey as a leading edge person? when you started this work, or did you just sort of go in it with your heart open and went, oh, God, look what's happening? How did it start?
You know, there's an old saying that a writer is someone who has something to say and who absolutely has to say it. And I can tell you that that expression very much applied to me, because after I found out about this concept of pre-birth planning, and after I realized how deeply healing it was for me, I felt that I had to bring this to the world. I very much appreciate your compliment about being courageous, because it was not long after that session with the medium that I left the corporate world completely, started work on my first book, Your Soul's Plan, on a full-time basis. And it took 3 years full-time, living off savings, and not knowing for that 3-year period if anybody was going to be interested in reading anything that I was writing. But again, I felt that I had something to say, and I absolutely had to say it. And I thought, this is just something I've got to do. Let the results be whatever they may. It's in the hands of the universe, but I'll do my part. And that was pretty much the way I approached it.
So when you're doing it, did you feel like something much larger than your former personality was at work here, where you were just sort of driven and pushed and pushed and driven and even elevated while you were doing this work for 3 years?
There's absolutely no question that that was the case. You know, the impulse to do this was so strong, and it was so illogical in many ways, particularly from a financial and career perspective, that I had the sense that it was coming from beyond me. And in addition to that, as I was doing the research and writing for the first book, it became very clear to me that there was a team of non-physical beings who were assisting me. I didn't know who they were, but it was clear when I was moving fingers across a keyboard, there was a sense that there are others here who are helping me. And I remember one moment when I was trying to convey in Your Soul's Plan the idea that energetically we all have a tremendous impact on the world, even though we don't see it and aren't usually aware of it. And I didn't want to just say that, because it's not very interesting when it's phrased that way. And I said to Spirit, I need an image, I need a metaphor here. And this image appeared in my mind of a hand holding a dropper. The dropper was filled with a dark dye, and it dropped one drop of the dye into the glass of water, and then I saw the dye diffuse through the entire glass of water. And then I wrote something like a single drop of dye added to a glass of water. Each of us has an energetic impact that goes well beyond what we can see. Something, that's not quite how I phrased it, but it was something like that. But there was this sense that this image was not something I created in my own mind. It was qualitatively different than thoughts of my own when I think them. And I knew it was coming from another source. And there were other things like that that happened throughout the course of the writing. So it was clear to me that there is a team in place here, and I'm just the one who's in body, again, moving his fingers across the keyboard.
I would love to go back for just a second to you prior to this life purpose mission that you jumped on board and you're doing an extraordinary job with. I would like to go back to when you were in corporate America, and then you're not feeling fulfilled, your heart's not full, you're not able to use your true soul essence, if you will. And then I would like to go from there to when you were asking your friends and certain other associates what they could picture you doing. And then I want to jump forward to today, 2015. What are those people back then saying about you today and what you're doing when they look at how bright and lit up you are from the inside out? Or do you even talk to them?
You know, I think that my friends who knew me before I started down this path are very happy that I am doing something that I love and that makes a difference in people's lives. But I think that most of them don't know quite what to make about the concepts themselves. I remember when I sent out the very first email newsletter shortly after my first book came out, and a friend of mine from college said to me, I read your newsletter and I thought to myself, is this the same Rob Schwartz I knew in college? You know, he just couldn't quite wrap his mind around the fact that this was coming from me. And I've noticed that many of my older friends and family members don't ask me questions about the work that I'm doing. I think because they just don't know quite what to make of it. But the interesting thing is that there are random individuals in my family and circle of friends whom it's almost like they will secretly pull me aside, say at a family function. And this has happened where somebody says, I've always believed in what you're writing, and sometime when we're alone, I want to talk to you more about this. But they don't want to acknowledge it publicly for fear of ridicule.
And that's starting to happen more and more, don't you think?
Well, I think, planet-wide, we're going through a collective awakening. And so there are more and more people like me and like all of you who have come into an awareness that we are more than the body, we are more than the personality, we are more than the thoughts and the emotions that we experience, that we are in fact wholly eternal, non-physical beings, just temporarily occupying a body suit, so to speak. And as more and more people have this sort of awakening, I think conversations about this will be much more public. And our conversation tonight is a good example of that.
I think so too. I also feel like it's going to start bleeding over into national television, and it's going to be incorporated more into movies. And by that, we're not talking sensationalized reality TV and that sort of stuff, just authentic, heart-centered information like what you're giving, what we're getting to experience in that ripple that you described really nicely earlier. And then we get to ripple that back to you. One of the things that I read in the Soul's Plan, your Soul's Plan, is something about how the spirit guides and certain soul groups are defining or describing the time we're in right now as the fear ages.
Yeah, that I think is a very powerful and accurate description. There's another section of dialogue somewhere in Your Soul's Plan where I'm talking with one of the spirit guides, and he says a lifetime on Earth essentially gives you the opportunity to learn to cope with fear. And, I think if we're honest with ourselves, everyone, almost without exception, perhaps those who are enlightened don't experience it, but everybody else, there's fear of so many different things: fear of rejection by other people, fear of illness and aging, fear of financial and economic uncertainty, fear of conflict between peoples and nations. And the list of fears is virtually endless. And we all experience this as we go through our lives. It's essentially how we respond to fear that determines, to a large degree, whether or not we're going to look at the life as successful when we have the life review. And we all do have a life review when the lifetime is over.
Child, I was in a car wreck in my 20s and I had a life review and I thought, is this it? And then they went, no, bitch. And they sent me right back down. When I was reading Your Soul's Plan, this is a memory that I had long forgotten. I wrote it somewhere in one of my other books back in the day, and thank God that book didn't sell because it was called Dancing in Dirt.
It was a good book. I read it.
But I'm flipping it.
I know.
And one of the things, I took it out because my mom said, Edward, I'm not going to tell you exactly what she said word for word because she seemed like a real spiritual person, Robert. But she said, Edward, blankety blank blank isn't true. And we didn't talk for a month, my mom and I. We talk all the time. And long story short, in the opening of that book, I was a pinpoint of light. I can remember this when I was growing up. I was a pinpoint of light, and I was sitting on a limb in the wintertime beside of another pinpoint of light under an old staticky street light. And we could, from where we were, fast forwarded all the way down to this little window that had frost over it. And it was a basement window. And we went to the window. I could look into the window. And while I looked in with my spirit guide, I was feeling, not only seeing, I felt, sensed, knew, vibrated everything that was going on in that basement. And my dad, my birth dad, was beating and kicking the daylights out of my mother. And I was the baby she was carrying. Wow. In that experience. And I knew then that my purpose in that lifetime, I knew it beyond a shadow of a doubt that my purpose was to be a male in my mom's life that was compassionate and empathic and sensitive. And I knew that. And then I withdrew from it, and then boom, I was born. Houdini. And then fast forward to, I forgot that once I got to the earth plane. And then I mistakenly thought that my purpose in this lifetime was to protect my mother. And so I spent my whole first 20 some, maybe 30 years thinking I was here to protect my mother. And now your book has helped me remember what my true purpose was. Now, that's a long-winded way to get to this. One of the things you brilliantly help us see is something, I think you call it learning through opposites. And that's when, if my purpose or part of my plan is to come in as a compassionate, sensitive person to help other people, then I was born into the exact opposite type of lifetime so that I could accrue those attributes myself. But I'll let you explain it, Robert, because A, you wrote the book and you're way more articulate.
Well, that was a very powerful story you shared. I appreciate that. Learning through opposites is my phrasing for one of the most profound ways in which the soul learns. Perhaps the best way to get at this, I like to borrow an analogy from a book other than my own. I'm sure many of your listeners will have heard of the Conversation with God books written by Neale Donald Walsch. The idea, they don't talk about it as learning through opposites, but they refer to it as learning through contrast. And in his discussion with God, this idea comes up, and God asks Neale Donald Walsch to explain it using the analogy of the white room, which goes like this. Imagine that you are a white being in a white room. So the ceiling is white, the floor is white, all the walls around you are white. Everything in this room is white, including you. Now, if you are such a being in such a room, how do you know that you're white? The answer is you don't. And in fact, you can't until you experience something that is other than white. Then, once you've had that experience, you understand much more profoundly what it means to be the white being in the white room. This, I think, is essentially what the soul is doing here on the physical plane. Because, we come from a realm, at least as I understand it, which is very much as it's classically portrayed. It's a realm of great peace and joy and love and light. So in such a realm, you are the white being in the white room. You experience no contrast to yourself. And because you experience no contrast to yourself, you don't fully understand or appreciate what it means to be the white being in the white room. So you come here to experience the contrast or the learning through opposites, because then when you go back to spirit at the end of a physical lifetime, you understand in much more profound ways who you are as an eternal soul. And who you are as an eternal soul is love. You come here for the not love, so to speak, the contrast, the opposite, so that when you go back, you understand what it means to be love.
What's really interesting about that, you talk about the white room, is actually I had a near-death experience, and when I did cross over, and I didn't fully cross over, but when I did go into an area that was like a white room, it was nothing but white. There was nothing, there were white walls, white ceiling, white floor, everything was white. So this is powerful. And when I was revived, I had so much love, I wanted to hug everybody around me. I just wanted to just hug and just be close to everyone. It was so much love to give. So that white room analogy is very interesting because it's what happened in my experience.
How long did that last?
It was something that there's no really measurement of time.
Right.
But all I can remember is actually having being a thought stream. And I would have a question, and before I could even get the full question out, it would already be answered. And it was nothing but energy. But you could still see certain things, but it was really hard to explain because it was totally out of body.
And do you hear a lot of stories like this, Robert?
I do. These sorts of experiences, it's a minority of the population, but perhaps maybe around 10% have had some kind of experience, whether it's a near-death experience or some kind of profound metaphysical experience. But again, a lot of people don't talk about it for fear of being ridiculed or not understood.
Right.
Well, you know what's funny about that? I know Tony's got a question. Is there was a time back in the day where if you believed in UFOs, you didn't talk about it. And then when 3 or 4 books come out, everybody says, I saw one too.
Yeah.
And then back in the day, nobody talked about psychic. So everybody was running up their 1-800 phone bills for Psychic Friends Networks. And now everybody's like, oh, I got 2 psychics on speed dial. and what you're doing is you're on the leading edge of this as well. And it's talking about the your soul's plan and the pre-birthing and the soul groups, et cetera, and so forth. Now, we're all in the minority, but we all found each other. Hercules. And then you are on the leading edge of this information too. There'll be the time it's like, my pre-birth group's name is Antoine, and he said...
And that comes back to the courage that you were talking about earlier.
I mean, this is brave.
Yeah.
Love
Brave.
these books.
Oh.
I mean, when I opened it up, the first book, and I opened up and read the introduction of the soul's plan,
Yep.
I was screaming in the house by myself because it was like, this is what I always thought. This is what I thought, and it's written down. And I was like, oh my god!
It's like the life's manual. It's
the
fully
Bible.
it's fully right there in front of you. Your instruction booklet is finally in front of you.
It's the before life manual that describes the life's manual and what's going to happen when you leave this planet and get your little ducks in a row.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tony.
Well, before I ask the question, I want to take a 15-second break. We got to do our little sponsor here. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back, and I'll ask my question. But I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
I'm Jamie Gibson.
And I'm John Williams.
And this is Truth Be Told on Universal Broadcasting Network. Be back in 15 seconds. Today's show is sponsored by Adventures Unlimited Press. Take your mind on a literary journey and go to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from our famed experts featured right here on Truth Be Told. That's adventuresunlimitedpress.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Eddie Connor.
I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Jamie Gibson.
And I'm John Williams.
And we have the author here. The #1 book is Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of Life You Planned Before You Were Born. And the book that Miss Jamie is reading is Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born.
Both books written by Robert Schwartz.
That's what I'm saying. We're so excited. And welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. And I want to ask this, and this is just a country boy from Kansas, growing up in the Bible Belt. So if everything is predetermined before we choose our path and our life before we even get here, what about the God saying is the choice?
Free will.
Free will.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So like somebody that commits suicide or somebody that dies in a car accident, sometimes we make choices that are wrong, but are they wrong? Is because did we choose that, or because there's a lot of Christians out there that are going, well, free will, that means we chose to kill ourselves or we chose to go down the wrong road. And so could you explain something like that for the people out there that might just be still struggling with the religion and the spirituality?
I love that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to address this question with a hypothetical story.
Go for it.
So let's say, hypothetically, that there is a soul who, and I will arbitrarily make this soul female, so we'll call the soul Sally. No sexism intended. Sally has had a number of past lives in which she made certain plans before coming into body, but when she got here, she had a tendency to defer to the wishes of others. She let other people basically tell her how to live her life, not an uncommon thing to do. Mm-hmm. So when Sally has her life reviews, she sees that she has this tendency, and she will be motivated to heal it. So Sally plans another incarnation in which energetically she will carry into body the tendency to defer to the wishes of others. Now, let's say that there is another soul in her soul group who has the opposite tendency. This soul has had a number of past lives in which he has run roughshod over others, dominated others inappropriately, exercised power inappropriately. And I'll arbitrarily make this soul male. We'll call him George. But again, no sexism intended.
Or Donald Trump.
Or Donald Trump. So because they're in the same soul group, Sally is aware of what has happened with George in his past lives. And like Sally, George has had his life reviews. He sees that he has this tendency to inappropriately use power over others, and he's motivated to heal it. So George plans another lifetime in which he will carry energetically into body the tendency to inappropriately use power over others. Again, because they're in the same soul group, Sally knows that George has made this plan. So let's say that Sally goes to him before either one of them is born, and she says to him something like, "Hey, George, I am taking back into body the tendency to defer to the wishes of others in the hope that I can heal this and learn to stand up for myself. I see that you're planning to take back into body the opposite tendency, the tendency to dominate others, and your hope is that you will heal this and learn to respect others. Why don't you and I agree that we will marry, let's say when we're both 30 years old? And although we know that this marriage is likely to be turbulent, our hope is that I will learn to stand up for myself and you will learn to respect others." And George says, "Sally, this is a great idea. I agree. Let's do it." So the plan is put in place. Now let's say that when Sally is 26 and she hasn't even met George yet, she has a job in which her boss is using power inappropriately over her, treating her with a lack of respect and kindness. And let's say that Sally marshals her internal resources and she takes a stand. She says to her boss, "Stop. If you want me to continue working here, you must treat me with respect and kindness." In the moment that Sally takes a stand like that, there's a huge increase in her vibration. If she can sustain that heightened vibration until she's 30, now one of two things will happen. Either she and George will never meet, because by virtue of the law of attraction, their vibrations are so dissimilar that they're never drawn together. Or, if they do meet, now they're not attracted to each other. There's one date, and then nothing comes of it. So, in this hypothetical story, Sally has used her free will to learn the plan lesson, which in turn obviates the need for the plan challenge. This is a hypothetical example of how free will intersects very elegantly and intricately with the pre-birth plan. Now, somebody listening to this story is going to say, well, wait a minute, what about George? Doesn't he still need to learn to respect others? The answer is yes, but there isn't just one plan for a lifetime. There isn't just a plan A. There is, but there's also a plan B, C, D, E, F, and on and on and on. So many backup plans that it's beyond human comprehension. So when Sally learns the plan lesson and takes herself out basically of George's plan, he now defaults to plan B, which could be almost anything. It could be another relationship. It could be some set of circumstances that call him to treat others with respect. And if he doesn't learn it in plan B, then he'll go to plan C and plan D and plan E. Most likely, the challenges will become increasingly intense if he doesn't learn as he goes along. That's the general pattern. But coming back to the basic story, what Sally did shows you how you can use your free will to obviate the planned life challenge.
I love that.
I do too. And I love how you're articulating it, but I also love the fact that there are so many plans. It's hard to wrap our little human brains around the tapestry and the multidimensionality and parallel universes of what we're talking about at the same time. And I love how it is all driven and moved forward by love. It just is.
Our highest good, yeah.
Yeah, our highest good. It really feels that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes, Robert, Jamie and I, because we don't have a life, sometimes Jamie and I will be talking on
We're
the phone.
soul sisters.
We are soul sisters. When I have this joke, well, I heard it whenever I got my first real intuitive reading, my first psychic reading years ago. And she was a very colorful person. And she said, well, tuning into you, it's like you tried to cram 5 lifetimes into one. And so when God was handing out tasks, you just kept raising your hand.
Give it me.
And finally, your soul group said,
That's
bitch,
enough.
please.
Share.
So my question is, how often do you see certain people come in that really pile a lot of stuff on their plate? I came in a horribly abusive childhood. And then on top of that, I was psychic. And on top of that, I was gay. And then on top of that, I was poor. And then on top of that, there's all kinds of other stuff that happened too. But what makes us choose such multi-layered lives to get certain lessons?
Well, I encounter a lot of people who meet that description. And I think they're coming to me because of the nature of the books I wrote. They are focused on the pre-birth planning of life challenges, and also because of the nature of the hypnotherapy I do. We can talk more about this later if you want to, but basically, most of my practice is devoted to something called a between-life soul regression, in which the client goes before what is called the Council of Elders, the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee reincarnation on Earth. They know everything about everyone, including their plan for this lifetime and everything that's happened in any of their past lives. So clients who have had very challenging lives and want to know, why did all these things happen to me? Did I really plan all this, and why would I have done that? The Council of Elders can answer those kinds of questions. So I see a lot of people who have put a lot on their plate, so to speak, in this lifetime. Now, as to why you would do that, there are a number of different reasons, but I think what it boils down to in many cases, and this is not quite the right word, but sometimes language is inadequate, and it's the best word I've got. Some souls are very ambitious. And again, that's not quite the right term, because at the soul level, it wouldn't be seen as ambition.
Right.
But from our perspective, it's the best word I've got. We put a lot on our plates because there's a lot we want to learn and accomplish in a lifetime. And many of the souls who are doing that would like to wrap up the cycle of reincarnation and finish in this lifetime. And so whatever karma they have to release and balance and whatever else they've still got to do, they've piled it into this one lifetime.
Oh my God, I love that answer. That makes me feel smart.
Well, one thing that just popped into my head, there's so many people out there that go through life, such as my parents and that generation, my dad's 80 and my mom's 76, and even my grandparents' age, they just lived. They didn't go for the dreams. They didn't do,
They didn't go out on a limb.
Yeah, they didn't go out on a limb, and now I'm starting. Now it clicked. I haven't not had the opportunity to read your books yet, but for the people that are listening, or maybe that say my life sucks, I have no purpose. It's maybe this life, the life itself, is not something that you're supposed to grow as in glamour and riches and money and house, but in soul. That's
to be.
Yeah, just to be.
Regardless of what you be, to be in that place where you get what you came here to get.
Right.
But sometimes it is sort of like a resting life between lives. But you
Right.
want to be here, but you don't want to volunteer for 37,496 things and then be gay.
Yeah.
The spirit guy, I know, I'm so excited. I'm sorry, Robert's going to be like, I am never calling UBM radio again. So with the fear ages, I tell you, and I hope I don't cry when I talk about this. People think I'm being silly, but I know I was a black woman, and I still feel like a black woman trapped in a white gay man's body. And I also have this love of African American, particularly women, and Native Americans. And I'm curious, has it ever come up where the soul groups or the council of elders and the beings of light, if you will, how do they describe the biggest genocide in American history with the Native Americans? How do they describe what might have been the lessons when we murdered and raped other parts of Africa to bring their people here to the United States and held them prisoner and hold them as property? I would love to know if anything has ever come forth about those points in history, Robert.
Holocaust.
Oh, oh my God! See, I just cried.
I have not specifically researched slavery or what happened to Native Americans. Your question makes me think, though, of a client I had who did a past life regression. This was a Caucasian woman in this lifetime, and she went back to a past life where she was a Native American male. And generally, when somebody does a past life regression and they go into the past life, they describe it as though they're a third party watching themselves, almost as though they're in a movie in the past life. But she became the personality of the Native American man. And it was as though that Native American man was sitting there in my office talking to me. It was one of the most extraordinary conversations I've ever had. And he was saying things that were just so authentic. For example, he said to me, "The white man is insane." And I said, "Well, what do you mean the white man is insane? Can you give me an example of that?" And he said, "Well, the white man builds his homes where the waters rise and flood. That's insane." And then he said, "The white man believes that you can own land. You can't own land. That's insane." And the conversation went on and on like that. It was really just extraordinary. Now, in terms of the Holocaust, this is something that I do have some information about, and I have to preface what I'm going to say by telling you there is channeled information out there about the Holocaust, and some of it is contradictory. So I will just share with you what I was told by a source that I consider to be trustworthy.
Thank you.
I was told that, believe it or not, Hitler's pre-birth plan was to be a great spiritual leader. And in fact, his soul gave him certain gifts that were intended to facilitate that. These would be gifts of charisma, oratory, rhetoric. Also, you might know that he liked to paint and was apparently pretty good at it. As I understand it, there was a specific option in his pre-birth blueprint for him to use his artwork to spiritually inspire people. But again, as going back to the story with Sally, we all have free will. And Hitler used his free will to respond to his very difficult childhood by basically going 180 degrees away from his soul's pre-birth intentions. So he took all of those gifts that the soul gave him to be a great spiritual leader and used them to do what he eventually did.
Yep.
Now, people always ask, well, what has become of Hitler? As I understand it, Hitler is back in the non-physical realm, and he's in what you could call a sort of self-created hell, in which he is over and over and over again reliving what was a very painful death in his lifetime as Hitler. Now, it's important to understand he's not being punished by God or the council or any being external to himself. In fact, there are no beings external to anyone. But nobody is punishing him. It's a self-inflicted punishment because at some level he is aware of what he did and can't quite face it yet and is punishing himself like this. Now, he's surrounded by angels and guides who are sending love and light to him just as they would to anyone who's doing that to themselves. At this time, he can't yet perceive the light, but eventually he will. He'll move toward it and into it. He'll stop inflicting this kind of torture on himself, and then presumably at that point, he'll have a lot of karma to balance in a lot of lifetimes.
Wow.
Not to oversimplify this question, do you think with the free will, Hitler growing up, having the difficult childhood, do you think he chose what he chose, obviously as an extension of the difficult childhood, but it would possibly be because he dropped out of love? Or feeling lovable or loved enough that triggered him to go in the direction he did.
Went to victim.
Yeah, instead of victory.
I think that in a nutshell, that is probably a very good and accurate description of what happened. And it reminds me, you in your original question, you asked about suicide. There's an entire chapter in Your Soul's Gift about the pre-birth planning of suicide. And we are told in a channeling by Jesus that suicide is never planned as a certainty, but it is planned as a possibility or a probability, or occasionally a probability so great as to be almost a certainty. And the story there is a young man named Cameron who hangs himself in his mother's home right after he graduated from high school. And the mother, Carolyn, comes home. She finds him hanging from the rafters. She's the one who had to cut him down. And in one of the channeling sessions, we talked to him directly, and we asked him, how did this happen? And he says basically what you just said. He said, when I was in body, I was so depressed and so anxious that I could not feel my family's love for me, and I could not feel my love for them. And then he steps aside, and Jesus comes back in, and he turns the notion of suicide on its head, because he says, what Cameron just told you is true. When he was in body, he could not feel his love for his family, and he could not feel their love for him. But now, from the other side, from the non-physical realm, he can feel that love quite acutely. And so from Hill's perspective, the suicide was actually a turning point toward light. So this idea that suicide is bad, is wrong, is evil, is a sin, he says this is not at all the perspective that Spirit has. He says for Cameron, it was a turning point toward light. And he actually goes on to say it worked out, quote unquote, quite well for him. So a totally different viewpoint on suicide.
Well, and out of the 20-some years I've done readings, I've never had someone who crossed over via suicide and came back and said they were in some awful place. And there are lots of other situations similar to that, but not once ever in literally 25 years has somebody come back in a, quote, dark place because we're taught it's wrong or right or good or bad or that sort of thing. And we have probably about 5 more minutes. It's like, where the heck does the time go?
We need 2
I
hours.
could talk to him all day,
know.
which we will.
Yeah, that's right. So, Robert, we know you're going to be here in September in the Los Angeles area. And the dates are, is it September 17th, 18th, and 19th? Is that right?
I think it's
Yeah.
actually 18,
18,
19, and
Okay.
20. Is that the Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, and Sunday?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And
18, 19, and 20.
Can you tell the audience a little bit of what they're going to get as a result of coming to your conference?
Sure. On that Friday evening, that would be September 18th, I'll give a talk for about an hour and 20 minutes about the 2 books that I wrote and why do we plan great challenges before we're born. I'll share some of the stories from the books. And then we'll have a question and answer period. So that'll be Friday night. Saturday morning, there's a 2-hour block of time in which we will briefly introduce ourselves to each other. And then the rest of that morning is unstructured. So it's an opportunity for people to ask any question they have about pre-birth planning or any other spiritual subject. Now, Saturday afternoon is, in my view, the highlight of the weekend. We're going to do a group between lives regression. So
that sounds fun.
people will be guided to go briefly into a past life, presumably one that is related to the plan for the current lifetime, and then from there to the between lives state, most likely to the Council of Elders, where they then have the opportunity to ask any question on any subject, including what is my plan for this lifetime, how am I doing in fulfilling the plan, what can I do to better fulfill the plan. That process will take probably about 3 hours, and then we'll have an hour of discussion in which people can share what happened if they would like to. Sunday morning, that would be September 20th, I'm going to lead people in something I call the Divine Virtues exercise. What I have found in my work is that one of the main reasons we plan challenges for ourselves before we're born is to have opportunities to cultivate and then express certain qualities that are important to the soul. These are things like compassion, unconditional love, forgiveness, patience, empathy. I compiled a list of about 28 of them that have come up most frequently in my research of people's pre-birth plans. In the Divine Virtues exercise, we work with this list, and I take people through a process in which they should be able to tease out the 2 or 3, and it usually is 2 or 3, divine virtues that they're working on in this lifetime. And that's very valuable information to have, because that's the reason that you're here in body experiencing challenges.
Because that's the core. And I would imagine that when people leave here, and I'm sure you get emails and love letters all day long from people like us who, when we leave something like that, we are so jacked up and happy and clear and focused and poignant that I'm sure people just have almost quantum leaps when they stay.
This is like Christmas to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
and,
I'm so
and
excited.
Halloween and Easter, because those are all the candy holidays.
And I think it shifts your paradigm towards life. I mean, and
Yeah.
understanding why things are the way they are.
Yeah. Robert,
To get those answers.
where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, I think by that time I'll have another book out and probably be working on a 4th book. And speaking of that, if I'm looking for people to interview for the next book who know from previous experience with regression, with hypnotic work, that they go into trance very easily and deeply. So any of your listeners who meet that description, please write to me at rob.schwartz, schwartz, at yoursoulsplan.com, and I'll be in touch with you about possibly interviewing for the next book. So I think there will be more books, more writing, and just going further in the hypnotherapy practice.
Wow.
Well, I have to say,
Yes.
Char Margolis, who actually is a show right after ours, her sister is a past life regression, and I volunteered to do one, and at first I was like skeptical because I'm ADD. It's very hard for me to even meditate or even think for about 2 minutes. Yeah,
He ain't lying.
I know. But I have to say, I went into this meditation. Like you said, it was like a movie. I went back into probably about 300 years ago. I was in England. I saw my face. I saw my wife. I saw a castle. I saw the paintings I drew. It was crazy, and I thought, am I just thinking this up?
You had LSD.
Yeah, yeah, and it was crazy to think that it could be that descriptive
And simple. And
simple. Yeah.
Here's something I've learned in all the years of doing readings. It's this: you can be the best psychic on planet Earth. You could be the number one psychic on planet Earth, but if you do not have a good, healthy, bright imagination that you use every day,
Right.
you've got a big handicap. But if you have a huge imagination and you're not
That's
very
me.
psychic, it's kind of an imbalance. And I feel like and I'm not putting words in your mouth, Robert, but I feel like when you have that intuition, that instinct, that creativity, that artistic expression, and you marry the imagination with that relaxed mind, and then your soul does take you to places like that so easy. And that's the natural state of well-being that you experience. This activity junkie-itis BS, this is not the way to do it.
So, well,
Sorry, Robert, I got off on a tangent.
well, we are honored. It's been it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope everybody that can go to your workshop here coming up on 18th, 19th, 20th here in LA. Go to the website yoursoulsplan.com and pick up the books. Come on,
look.
yeah. Your Soul's Plan. There's what people see it on the screen, and your soul's gift.
And look, we're just gonna be because we good students, Robert. Can you see can you see
The
how
highlighting?
the
Mine
highlighting,
looks
the
about the
thing?
same.
Every page is highlighted.
Yeah.
It's
so.
like we are Robert addicted.
You are our guru.
You are honestly.
Honestly.
We listen. You can feel your energy through the book. You can feel the core essence of what you're bringing to the earth plane. I'll stick by it. It is brave. But there's this sort of unassuming's not the right word, but there's this sort of innocence, quiet, powerful, relaxing, safe bubble that you pull us into. And I think that's why you're able to get by with so much, Robert.
Well, thank you so much, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And we hope you come back soon. We really would love to have you again.
I'd love to. Thank you.
All right, take care. All right, everybody. Well, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time for Unlock the Universe.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I'd rather listen to the other one.
Me too.
Right?
Thanks, friend.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
your soul group just bitch slapped you tonight.
I'm being honest.
Well, if you guys tuned in late, make sure you pick up the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn. If you missed the video, you can go to YouTube. Just look up Truth Be Told Web TV. Or you can go to Web TV, truthbetoldwebtv.com, find out all our upcoming guests, and there's an archive of all the video archives of all of our guests. You can watch Eddie's Unlock the Universe, older shows, and we have a very special guest next week. Well, two of them. One that you might know from Ancient Aliens. We have Eric Von Daniken is going to be on the show.
That's
and
right. And Claire Bidwell Smith. She's going to be talking to us about her brand new book. She has 2 books. This is her newest book.
Well, I'm excited, and we're so honored to have you guys tune in every week. And if you're listening to the podcast, we really appreciate it. And go to our website, join our newsletter. We're sending out newsletter a couple times a week, so you can keep up on all of our guests.
And it's purty.
It is kind of pretty.
You
isn't
do
it?
a real good job with
Well,
that, Tony
thank you
Sweet.
very much. Well, John Williams,
Yes.
thank you for sitting in
My
on
pleasure.
this.
Thank you for having me.
Jamie, thank you so much. How can
Oh, I
people
had so
get a
much
hold
fun.
of you?
Oh, you can reach me at readings by Jamie. That's JAMI.com.
So if you need a reading here in Los Angeles, or can they
Or
Skype
by
in?
phone, Skype, you name it.
There you go.
Text, email, whatever.
And Eddie, give us your website anyway.
EddieConnor.com.
That's easy enough.
CONNER.
ER.
Because I'm an Not an or.
He's an inner, not an or. All right, we're out of here. Truth be told, I'm Tony Sweet.
I'm Eddie Connor.
I'm Jamie Gibson.
And I'm John Williams.
All right, have a great week.
Bye,
Stick
y'all.
around for Shar Vision.